Hey everybody, welcome back to the MLB Draft podcast. I'm your host, Travis Chick, and I'm joined by the newest member of our team at AWM Capital here, making his podcast debut. Please welcome Will McGuffey to the show. Will, how are you today?
Doing great, man. Looking forward to this.
Good. Yeah, me too. And I'm especially excited for this episode because we get the opportunity to interview one of the best Division I recruiters in the country. Also, please welcome to the show Texas A&M coach Justin Seeley. Coach, welcome to the show.
Man, thank you, Travis. That's a introduction my mom would be very proud of. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm sure your mom's proud, and I'm sure you've made Texas A&M proud. One of the, and that's actually one of the reasons I'm so excited to have you on here today because, I think you're perfect for this podcast today, and because so many draft hopefuls out there are kind of going through this one. What does going through the draft mean? What does going through recruiting mean? And if you look back over the last, say 10 years of what you guys have done there at Texas A&M, it's pretty remarkable how much it relates to the draft. As I look back, some of the information that I specifically want to highlight is, from 2011 to 19, you guys have had over 60 players drafted. And on the financial side, which is kind of where we're going to lean a little bit of the focus to today, there's accounts for over $37 million in signing bonuses. And what's even more remarkable about that to me is that doesn't even take into consideration all those kids that you signed that didn't make it to campus because they got some big bonuses.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That the process that we go through starts a long, long time before I think, you guys would get involved or professional baseball would get involved. And then, that last year of their career, I mean, there's a lot that gets thrown at them at that point. I think we'll touch on a lot of that, but how prepared guys are for that last year for their senior season, or even for, when they're in their junior season of college, they're obviously a lot more prepared, but even at that point, there's still some lack of knowledge at that point. So it is definitely a whirlwind. It's Major League Baseball is kind of like Las Vegas, right? They own the casinos. They know the rules to the game,
and they make the rules.
Yeah, they make the rules, and we're all the people that are going in there to go play the games. And some may win big, but most do not. And I think that's probably the best way to look at it. You need to be educated on what you're doing.
Yeah, and I'm actually really glad that's kind of where you started this off, and that's where I really wanted to focus off. For so many of this elite level talent. Typically, like you said, the recruiting starts with, the college coaches. They're the ones seeing them the first, the earliest in their career. And once they, I think really once you guys identify them as elite talent, that's when the agents kind of come in right after you guys. And so, and for me, when an agent comes in, it identifies the reality that, this is a business decision. It's going to be a business decision for them, because when you start talking about an agent, you're hiring somebody to help you make what ultimately is a financial decision. So, for me first, maybe touch on how you've seen some of these families get the information that they're making. And then how, what are some of the things that you've seen have helped them be so successful in that decision process?
So I would, kind of backtracking from the beginning of that we set the market. Like, I think, well, let me back up. The player sets the market, right? And we put a value to the market based off of where they decide to commit and
Right.
Who it makes that decision on who to offer, who offers them. So their market value starts really at a very young age it's a big decision to them, but to them, they probably don't quite consider the weight of that decision at that
Right.
point. And then there's a long gap between literacy of you've already set your market value. There's a large gap between, what the reality of that is.
Sure.
Right. So, man, it's a strange process that we go through. And it's a little silly that we recruit guys at the age that we do. I think it is a little silly. And a little foolhardy to think that we know everything at that age. But truth of the matter is if we don't make decisions at that point, then somebody else will. So you end up missing out on some players if we don't. So yeah, I would just say the financial literacy part of it, the agent part of it, the agent to me, the advisor part of it from our standpoint.
Yeah, we got to get that language right.
Yeah, the education of the finances does not come in with an advisor to me until we get down to the last little bit, and it's more they're recruiting at right after we make that decision with players, and that player makes a decision with us. They start recruiting more than they start
Teaching.
probably. Yes, there you go. That's the
Do you
right
think
word.
that causes any issues as far as the financial literacy coming in so late into the process? And there's so much going around that last year when you're talking about, hey, I'm actually signing at my university, and now I'm going through this draft process of, hey, what is my value? Do you think there's too much information that's brought to the table too late? Do you think there's a point in time where more information can be better understood earlier? And do you
Yes.
think there's a gap in actual information out there? Is there enough information to help these families make informed decisions throughout these processes?
No, there's not enough information for them to make an informed. Like you need people that deal with this on a daily basis. This is a very unique business that we're in. That it's not like you go to LinkedIn
Yeah.
and you put your profile on there, and then the St. Louis Cardinals say, "Yeah, we like you." It's that's not the way it works. Minor leaguers don't have a union. They don't have a whole lot of rights.
Right.
A lot of people backing them. So yeah, I mean, in that last year, referencing what you're saying, Will, is they I believe kids and families are drinking through a fire hose at
No
that
doubt.
point. All the information that they're trying to absorb. You guys are professionals. You know what you're doing. You know what's in your head. You guys talking to them, that's just everyday language to you. But to most families, this is like drinking through. And most people, I know how I am. Most people will nod their head and go, "Yeah, I understand that," without a true understanding of really what they're receiving in terms of information. So yeah, I mean that process. It's a never ending process,
For
right? We
sure.
don't do enough job of educating kids. I think even in schools when it comes to financial literacy,
No doubt.
on top of that, you're going to start making like huge life changing decisions your senior year of high school, which I would not have
Yeah.
been.
It's interesting that you kind of go down that because one of the things that we hear quite a bit is on the business decision. Agents are notoriously, like you said, recruiting and protective of the guys that they get, right.
Right.
And I actually said this on a previous podcast. I think the reality is a lot of agents, they don't want to go down that financial side yet because historically they see a lot of unqualified people helping these players that's not going to actually lead them to make the best financial decision. So, what that ultimately leads to is it leads to this kind of closed off, hey, we're going to be very reactive to this decision. And so
Mm-hmm.
what a lot of agents end up saying is, hey, wait until you sign, wait until you sign. Is that some, and a lot, and they've actually used the term because that signals to the market that you want to sign, which I just think is crazy because if you're hiring an advisor, which is actually an agent, like to me, that's signaling to the market that you're exploring the opportunity to sign. What would you tell players kind of making that decision about being proactive versus reactive?
I mean, ask as many questions as you can. Like, don't just settle for, "Hey, let's just wait till." Okay, I'll go to the draft first. You are making a life changing decision. This is how this works. The Toronto Blue Jays have the third pick of the draft. Let's just say, call you and you have a couple minutes to make a life changing decision.
An emotional, life changing decision.
That's right. And you're offered a ton of money right here, but you've also got the Braves on the other line saying, "Hey, we're at the fifth pick. You know, like if you can wait, we may be able to put together a better package for you." And you're having to make this decision all within 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and if you are not prepared for this, like you are going to lose a ton of money. Number one, um, and if you are waiting And okay, I know I'm talking about the third or the fifth pick, but let's say you're not the third or the fifth pick, right? So now I'm trying to make a decision about whether to go to college or whether to sign, and I have no background on what I'm supposed to do, or we've just tried to shove it all in the last 2 weeks whenever my season's over. It's like you're lost, like you're losing. The casino is going to win in that instance.
There's a reason everything is in gold in a casino, right?
That's right.
There's something you said there about, y'all mentioned the emotional decision. For those of y'all that don't know, and obviously Coach and Travis know, my background as an attorney and previously working as an advisor and an agent. One of the key thought processes that throughout the spring that we used to take families through was, hey, let's do everything now in advance of those last couple of weeks, so that when it comes down to the last week and you're actually having those discussions, there is no emotion. It's a pure business decision, because when you get caught up in the emotion of Major League Baseball teams actually calling you to pick your name, to take you in the draft, to offer you an amount of money that seems like a large amount and life changing, but you can't even define life changing, and you get caught up in the emotion, that's when people tend to make mistakes. And unfortunately, the decision whether to go to college or go to professional baseball absolutely will shape the rest of your life. And it's something that, if you use emotion in that decision making process, you're probably going to make the wrong decision, and it's going to shape your life positively or negatively. And you need to really understand why you're making that decision before you do it. So it's something that, I think that the education component is so important to these guys at an early age. And Coach, let me ask you, a couple things. When you've seen players that have either, gone in the draft and been successful in that decision, or come to campus and have been successful in that decision, can you give us a little bit more insight on, like, what was their actual education process? Like guys said, hey, this was a good process. What did that look like? Or what have you learned when those players and their families had good information and were unemotional and made the right decisions, either whether they showed up or whether they, did not show up on campus?
Right. So I'll use Asa Lacey, who we had last year. That was, I think, the fourth pick of the draft. So in high school, Asa's family and they got to a point where they were comfortable with a number, and they never wavered from that number. And they had that number to the point that you're making. They had that number well in advance of well in advance of the draft, so that they got comfortable with it. Like they sat with it, like they knew it. There wasn't the back and forth discussion of, well, this or that, or what about this, and what about if it's this organization or that organization, because this is the game that gets played. They just got really, really comfortable with that number. And then so he was able to, if they'd have got to the number, he's gone. And we knew it. He knew it. That was it. If they did not get to that number, he was coming to Texas A&M, and he was going to do everything he could to not make them pay, but to I guess improve his
Realize
stat.
his market value.
Yeah, that's it. And he ended up on campus very comfortable with him. He made a very comfortable decision, and I think that helped him. There was never him looking back over his shoulder thinking, well, what if I would have done this, or what if I would have done that, or what if so the days where it's difficult in college, he never was questioning his decision. Was at peace with his decision, and that made me, that's one of the main factors that allowed him to become the player that he is.
No doubt. No, I think that's a trait that we see quite a bit, especially as for the high school guys that are coming up. And I think it's interesting because at the end of the day, your job at Texas A&M is to recruit the best players in the country and then go win national championships. And so, colleges to me are a little conflicted in, like, hey, how do we, or at least outside in, like, they're conflicted in how do we give the guy the best information to make the best decision possible, but ultimately, how do we also get them to campus? And so, I just, are you guys able to actually provide them any kind of guidance in that? And because maybe they don't have an agent, or maybe they don't have an advisor, or parents that understand that, like, kind of walk us through that recruiting, and not to give away your recruiting secrets or anything like that, but I mean, just high level, how do you arm them with information? Because at the end of the day, the baseball world is better off when people make good decisions.
Right. So for us, I don't mind telling you. So for us, you recruit the player, you commit the player, you continue a relationship with the family to the point where they get comfortable with the words that you're using, with the how you talk, like how you speak, like how you communicate. We get comfortable with how they talk, how they speak, how they communicate. And then when you get to pretty much like right kind of junior summer, like going into their senior year, you start realizing, okay, this guy has a real future, based off of how his current where he is currently. And so we start the process of educating them on what the degree from Texas A&M provides them. That is number one, because we take baseball completely off the table at that point. Like, okay, let's just talk about you as a student. Let's just say that you never ever played baseball at Texas A&M. This is what the degree at Texas A&M provides you. Okay, and then you start adding the pieces onto it. Now being a baseball player at Texas A&M, now playing in the SEC. Okay, now playing for national championships. Okay, now past that, now we start talking about the draft, and then we get to the draft component. It me, there's a line of demarcation. There's a line where you are buying your way into the big leagues in the draft, because to me, the way we look at the draft and the way we tell our guys is they are paying you retirement up front. So Major League Baseball, your signing bonus is not for you to go spend now. It is for your retirement when you get done, because you don't get pension, you don't get any of those things unless you have a certain level of Major League service. So there is no retirement, right? And you get to that point, which they all think they will, and we all hope that they will, but the reality of it is that's not the case. So that is the way we work on it. We do it in a big forum first with all, and then we start getting more player specific the longer we go and the closer we get up to there. And hopefully also they're getting that information on from another side as well, right? So that the information is adding up.
What are some of the things? Because, and this is coming from somebody that, look, I grew up in a University of Texas family. I didn't understand Texas A&M. I now live in
Don't hold that against
Baton
him.
Rouge. What's that?
I said, don't hold that against him, Coach.
Yeah, don't hold. Well, I mean, it's even worse. I live in Louisiana, have an LSU
Yeah.
degree. My kids I'm raising them as Tigers. But over my professional career, I got to take an inside look at Texas A&M and the unique culture and everything that surrounds it, and how how do you quantify like what it means to be a Texas A&M graduate? How is there a way you do that? Because when I would talk to players, and when it was Texas A&M, there's great cultures. LSU is it's sitting here in my backyard, and it's a place like that too. And there's all over the SEC, University of Texas. But I always told guys, look, whether baseball works out or not, if you go to one of these universities, if you go to Texas A&M University and you're a part of that team, you're a good citizen, you keep your nose clean, even if baseball doesn't work out the way you want it to work out, you're going to have a successful life. How do you quantify that to an individual? How do you communicate that to them and get them to understand? Because like I said, I was a grown up before I really understood what it meant and what the culture and the network, the Aggie network, really was.
Yeah. So we're one of the three largest universities now at this point from an enrollment standpoint, but we are in a community, right? So we're one of the three largest universities with a community feel. So I think it inherently builds this like bond. I think that's what makes our Aggie network different than everybody else. If you go to the University of Texas, you disappear into a city of whatever it is now, 2.5 million, maybe 3 million people or something like that. If you're in the DFW area, even Baton Rouge to a degree is larger than College Station. So for us, we have a community feel with a huge university. And oh yeah, on top of that, we have as many Fortune 500, Aggies as there are any other university, and that's including Ivy Leagues. Oil and gas is huge, obviously, with the engineering here. Business is huge here. Our Mays Business School is one of the top 5, I think, public institution like business schools. So the Aggie network is a tight knit community with like big reach, and I think that's the way we describe it the best. And it's not just I think for me growing up, Will, probably a lot like you, like I looked at it as if you went to Texas A&M, like that would carry you a long way in Texas, but really more now because of the size of the university, it is a national and worldwide thing more now than it ever has been. So that's the way that we attack it. That's the way we approach it. And to me, we're definitely talking about reality. I'm not spinning a dream. I'm
Yeah.
talking about reality.
I think that's important because, so often when we get families to, decide they want to work with us kind of prior to the draft, much like what you were saying, is it really allows us to dive into, and we use the term quite a bit with our clients, is the term human capital, right? And like human capital is your ability to earn money. Whether it's throwing a baseball, whether it's hitting a ball out of the park, or whether maybe you're going to be able to use your brain and go out and make a lot of money. And so, what we can do in some of these kind of pre-draft decisions to help families come to these numbers is we can actually go in and get a present value of a degree from Texas A&M or a degree from Vanderbilt, or pick a college, right? Like we can value that education, but we can also value the types of careers that stem from that education. So it does a really good job of kind of giving you a present value of what your ability to earn income is, which should help you kind of correlate a decision between, okay, what my bonus number should be. Because, like you said earlier, when you separate baseball, you're worth something. It's up to you to realize that. But when you can figure out what that number is, that's the decision that says, hey, am I going to college, or is this enough to work? I'd like to shift gears really quick and just kind of talk about draft and this looming thing that we have over our heads still after a year as COVID. For you guys, obviously, the recruiting has probably changed quite a bit, especially with eligibility requirements. What advice would you give, the seniors this year who are trying to decide, hey, maybe I'm a second rounder. That's where the baseball America, and who knows like whether that's right or wrong, but what advice would you give to kind of that fringe guy that's saying, hey, what should I do here?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of advice, and going back to one of the points you made earlier, depending on how good a student you are, depending on the place that you're going, the degree that you're capable of getting just as a student, I think that plays a large part into that. Because look, guys that make it to the big leagues to me don't ever think that they're not going to make it to the big leagues. But the ones that are best prepared, if they don't, are the ones that have actually worked at their craft off the field as much as they've worked at their craft on the field, right? Like, so they are actually putting weight and stock into those things. And it gives you leverage. Like when it comes, that gives you leverage. It's a big game of chicken when it comes down to the draft. Like, are you willing to do this or are you willing to not, and increase or decrease your value because a team is not going to pay you what you're worth if they think you'll take less. So that's the truth of the matter. So if you're willing to sign for less, you may be worth $3 million, but if you're willing to sign for 750, why would I pay you $3 million? I might pay you one and you might be really, really happy about it, in that instance. So, if I am that guy, I think there's a number of different factors that go into that. But to me, it always comes down to the same question outside of the education part of it is, am I going to buy myself into the big leagues? There's a line that a major league team is going to invest enough money in you that even if you have a year where you hit 260 and hit 8 home runs and you have an injury riddled season, that they are going to give you the opportunity to move in the minor leagues
to overcome a bad year.
That's right. It gives you grace in their eyes.
Yeah, I'm super glad you said that, because for us, I mean, there is market value, right? Like everybody, I mean, I did it. Like I got drafted, I got to the big leagues. I never once in a million years thought that I ever wouldn't spend a career in the big leagues. And I think anybody that ever puts on a glove or holds a bat that wants to have that career path, they probably feel the same way. And that's where I think this emotional disconnect is. It's, hey, I think that my market value is, I'm going to use Aza, call it $7 million, right? Like, I think that's what my market value is. But if you're not very well prepared going into the draft, you don't really know what your intrinsic value is, right? Like that's where an agent does a really good job in helping you understand what your market value is. And I'm sure, the coaches probably also have insight with a lot of the scouts to help you identify what your quote unquote market value is. But especially, college guys or high school guys, both, I just feel like there would be players would be so much better served if they knew, hey, if I don't get 3 million out of the draft, I'm okay with that, because guess what? I may be going to Texas A&M to get an engineering degree and go straight at, to work at, pick a company, one of the Fortune 500s, or I may be going to Vanderbilt and I'm going to get a law degree. And I know that my career path, my human capital is worth $8 million in present value. So it gives people the confidence. And I loved the word that you used a minute ago, was leverage, because that's where agents feel like they kind of have you, as they're able to have leverage against the team. But we all know it's $1 billion companies negotiating with people that probably aren't even financially literate at this point. And so, we often argue the more information that you have, and I'm glad you said that earlier, the more information you have, the better. And obviously, you just want to be kind of sensitive to your time. But is there anything else that you would really want to hit on before we start trying to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, I would say this. The one thing that comes up a lot, like if I'm talking to our recruits, is, well, I can always come back and get my degree, right? Um, if I sign now, I can always come back and get my degree. Major League Baseball has this scholarship fund. I can see both of you kind of grinning. The amount of that fund that gets used is minuscule by comparison to what's in that fund. And that's right. And Major League Baseball knows this. And, you know, the different, okay, just knowing in the baseball world, knowing the difference between an area scout, a cross checker, a national cross checker, like the GM, like knowing who these people are, you know, if I have an area scout telling me that this is what, there's a hierarchy to this, and if I have an area scout telling me, well, yeah, you can always come back to Texas A&M and you can always get your degree and we can pay for it. Okay, he's correct. There is that avenue. The likelihood of that avenue getting used in reality is not very good. Here's the reasons why for us is once you are 25 or 26 and you get released and you are done and you did not make it to the big leagues, or you made it to the big leagues just for a little bit, okay, all right, you're going to have to go back to school. Now, how many people at 25 or 26, most of the time, I would say a lot of the time, people have started a family at that point. Going back to school.
You're telling my story right now, by the way.
Okay, all right. So you can know this story as good as anybody then, right?
No
so
doubt.
You've started a family. It is very difficult to go back to school. They have needs.
Yep.
The thing is, are you going to get back into Texas A&M at this point? Like, are you going to get it back into Texas A&M? Is that going to happen, right?
Yep.
So am I going to have to get a degree from, like, let's say me growing up in Nacogdoches, Texas, am I going to have to go get a degree from SFA, which there's nothing wrong with that. But the difference between a degree from SFA, and we're talking about finances, right? The difference between that degree and Texas A&M, there's probably a pretty big difference, right? So I'm getting that degree from SFA, and yes, they may be paying me for that, but I have to pay for that all up front, and then they're going to have to reimburse me. And I'm putting, and if I took my bonuses as well while I was in professional baseball, that knocked that down as well, the amount that I have. And so the likelihood of guys using that and why guys don't use it, there's a lot of reasons as to why. And I think people use that as a fallback to justify what they want to do, what they think they want to do, the upfront money. In reality, for us, from a college standpoint, just I've seen it enough. I know enough. It is that the Major League Baseball financial scholarship plan is, the intention of it is fabulous.
Sure.
The execution of it is not fabulous.
Right.
It's less than that. So
yeah, no, that's I'm so glad you hit on that. I mean, like I said, you literally just told my story. At 26 years old, I was released, and baseball didn't care that I was a prospect at one point or a big leaguer at one point. At some point, there was somebody younger and better and ready to fill my spot. And so, literally, had a family started, had to go back to school, and I'm so thankful that I had a wife that was able to help supplement that. Obviously, I worked full time on top of going to school full time, so it's very difficult. But I want to touch on real quick before we end this thing. And one of the things you talked about was that hierarchy of on the baseball side. Talking about the area scouts, the cross checkers, and the GM. I mean, going up through that ladder. And I think if I'm shifting gears a little bit, I mean, there's that same hierarchy in finance, and there's also that same hierarchy on the agent side. And so often, where I think that there's a disconnect, and Will could probably speak to this more than anybody here, is there are agents or advisors that are out there that actually are not certified agents. They're recruiters. They're going out to just try to get you in the door for the agency. And so often that's like, hey, this is my advisor. The reality is this isn't even a certified agent that's able to qualify and make good advice. On the finance side too, I mean, there's people that are absolutely qualified to do that. There's 300,000 financial advisors in the country. The reality is there's only about 80,000 certified financial planners. And there's only about 2,300 certified private wealth advisors. So, you're able to distill down where the expertise lies if you actually know where to look. If I'm a draft pick and I'm going and I want to ask questions, which is why we're having this podcast today. I go to somebody like you that actually understands what draft picks go through, both on the high school side and the drafts, or on the college side. If I'm a draft pick and I'm looking for the best information I can be, I want to make sure that my agent can pick up the phone and call, Mark Shapiro or a GM, because he's actually an agent. And then the same thing, if I'm making financial decisions, I want to make sure that that person is not only qualified in their industry, but qualified in the baseball industry. So,
Right. Yeah. And to use your point, I'm going to use Will as an example. Like, if you're going to have, if I know for our players that are in house, especially, if you are going to have an agent, your agent, or excuse me, your advisor needs to be able to have somebody in free agency or on their roster that they want, because guess what? They pick up the phone for those guys. They don't, they have the same amount of time that everybody else has, but they have a lot more going on with their time than most do. You need somebody that when that phone rings and they see their name on it, they're going to pick it up. And if you don't have that guy, you're in a tough spot.
No, that's absolutely true, because when you think about it, the people that actually make the decisions, everybody has their job and there's a hierarchy, when you're talking about professional baseball, but who's actually writing the check, who's actually making the decisions? You play the telephone game and the message changes a little bit till it gets all the way down. Instead of having all these filters in place, you want your guy to be able to go to the top and be able to talk to that decision maker about the real decision, and have that line of communication open. And if you don't, there's something that always does get lost in translation. And so that definitely is an issue, and the same thing on the financial side. And this is something that, you look at as who's worked with people in your situation, who understands the game of baseball, who understands like what your career actually looks like. It's you want to understand, okay, my 5-year outlook, if I'm drafted out of high school, if I'm drafted out of college, looks like this. If in my second year of pro ball, I've accomplished XYZ, where am I now, and how does my financial plan change, or does it stay the same? And there is an inherent advantage of having people on the inside, just like it's like having, somebody that's dealt with draft picks before, coming in and out, seeing their stories of going to college or not. There's an inherent advantage of that experience in those same exact shoes, taking those families through those situations and understanding all the ramifications of the decisions and every angle to look at when they're trying to make those decisions.
Right. And if I can, and you guys you may disagree, but I also think like just taking the financial advisor person that your agent recommends is not necessarily it. I'm not saying it isn't the way to go, but I'm not saying it's necessarily what you need to evaluate your option. You have options. Like, you need to evaluate your options. To Will's point, like, people that have actually dealt with guys that you want to be and that you think you might be, right? Like they have dealt with those kind of problems. But so when you've got a fire, like when you've got an issue coming up, you've got somebody that has dealt with it. Travis obviously has been a player. Will has dealt with multiple sides of this. Well, from two very similar, but they have different goal sides, right? So, I want somebody that can see it from multifaceted angles too, right? So, like to me, that's the thing. If I'm making this decision, especially if I'm top of the food chain when it comes to the draft, this is you have options. You don't just have to do what you are told to do when it comes down to your financial, your advisement.
Yeah, no, I that definitely resonates a lot with me because, one of the we hear this quite a bit in the industry, baseball is a game, but professional baseball is a business. And so, immediately when you I don't want to use the term hire, right? But you agree to work with an advisor, essentially you've made a business decision. And I guarantee you that none of the players that actually sat down with that advisor hired that guy and never met with anybody else, right? Like the top pick in the country is going to meet with all of the top agents and probably everybody else. And he's going to figure out exactly who, kind of like what you were saying earlier, like who the guy, who he, agrees with, who he can get along with, who he meshes with, like, because this is a relationship business. And on the backside of that financial side, so often we see and we reap the benefits of this quite a bit. And I don't want to like discount that, but a lot of times an agent will just say, "Hey, you need to go with this because this is who all of my people work with," um, which sometimes is fine. But again, it's a business decision, and you know, much to you probably don't want any of the players that you're trying to sign to meet with any other schools, but you realize that they are, and so. I think it's just helpful to kind of bring into context, like, hey, this is a business decision. Go out and find the best qualified people to help you make the best advice. One of the things that we say all the time is you're about to be the CEO of a multi-million dollar company. Your job is to hire the people around you. Your agent is the COO, the chief operating officer. You need to hire a CFO to be able to help you make really good financial decisions. Like you're surrounding yourself with a team of experts so that the only thing that you have to do is go out and focus on how to be the best baseball player you can be. So um, well, Coach, man, I sincerely appreciate the time. I know you guys are getting ready for a big season. Hopefully there's no shutdowns like last year. We can go out and play. But thanks again for joining the MLB Draft podcast. If there's anything else you'd like to close out on, I'll let you close it out.
No, I'm grateful for the time. Appreciate you guys having me. It's this the subject that I am obviously, or I try to make it apparent that I'm obviously passionate about and
Sure.
try to get as educated as I possibly can. And you
Yeah.
guys, if I pick up the phone and I'm talking to one of you guys, I always do get educated on it. It helps me. So very grateful for you guys asking me to be on. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well,
Appreciate it,
thanks
Coach.
again,
We'll
Coach.
definitely see you out there at some point this year, man. Looking
All
forward
right,
to it.
guys.
Yep. See you
Yep.
on the trail. Best of luck to you.
The information in this podcast is educational and general in nature and does not take into consideration the listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific, individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision.